Hello, welcome to World News Today. Here are the top breaking stories for you. Donald Trump is trapped between two impulses on Iran. Biden releases new Iowa digital healthcare ad emphasizing family. A high-stakes Brexit court case could force the Queen to pick a side. Israel's Netanyahu fights for the record fifth term. President Donald Trump is stuck in a political box, largely of his own making on Iran, a predicament that becomes more intractable with each alarming cycle of escalation. In the aftermath of a sophisticated attack on a Saudi oil field, Trump is being torn between two political and character traits that are straining to define his foreign policy. He is desperate to avoid a new Middle East quagmire but cannot bear to look weak. "I don't want war with anybody," Trump said Monday before returning to bombast. "We have the strongest military in the world. We are prepared more than anybody." The struggle raging inside the president helps explaining the contradictory twists of a session with reporters in the Oval Office on Monday. His remarks left future U.S. strategy opaque. They also underlined how the president's plight is the predictable result of his own political choices. Perched on his YOLO armchair next to the Crown Prince of Bahrain, Trump hardly seemed like a steely commander-in-chief, locked and loaded for action. An image he had promoted in a weekend tweet that put the world on edge. "I'm not looking to get into new conflict, but sometimes you have to," he said. The man who tweeted in 2014 that Saudi Arabia should fight their own wars is now being asked as president to protect a kingdom that won his favor with ostentatious flattery on his first official trip abroad. Trump made clear that he had not made any promises to the Saudis, but added in a less than ringing assurance to an ally to which he has synced U.S. foreign policy. "We will work something out with them." Asked whether Iran was behind the attack, Trump said, "It's looking that way." Yet moments later, he rebuked a reporter who sought clarification, saying, "I didn't say that." After a day of lurching political messaging, the impression Trump sent the world was of a president playing for time, keen on preserve off-ramps for himself, and downplaying a crisis that rocked oil markets, could stunt global growth, and traumatize the economy he needs to ride to re-election if he gets any worse. Former Vice President Joe Biden campaign is rolling out a new digital advertisement in Iowa focused on healthcare, which he continues to make a signature issue of his candidacy. "When it comes to family, it's being there that counts," the narrator says, "because every moment matters, and every family deserves to have good healthcare from day one. So let's build on Obamacare and finish the job." The 15-second ad called "Family" is running on YouTube. It is a part of the campaign's six-figure advertising campaign on television and digital platforms in Iowa. According to data from the media tracking firm Advertising Analytics, Biden's campaign has spent $686,573 on television advertisements in the Hawkeye state. The Biden campaign says family is designed to complement the healthcare message in other television and digital advertisements by hitting voters multiple times a day. While the ad will reach voters across Iowa, the campaign says it will specifically focus on new parents and it will target voters who are engaging with products designed for newborns. Most of the advertisement features home picture and videos, which the campaign gathered from supporters. It shows families spending time together and newborn babies in the hospital before closing with a shot of Biden hugging former President Barack Obama. The United Kingdom, once a beacon of political and diplomatic stability, has descended into chaos since it voted to leave the European Union in 2016. The United Kingdom, once a beacon of political and diplomatic stability, has descended into chaos since it voted to leave the European Union in 2016. The referendum opened a seemingly unbridgeable divide that has led to political deadlock and stretched Britain's famously unwritten constitution to its limits. The Supreme Court will try to pick a way forward this week, but ultimately it could come down to Queen Elizabeth II to pick side, and that's something Queen will be desperate to avoid. The court case hinges on whether Prime Minister Boris Johnson misled the monarch when he advised her to suspend or prorogue Parliament. Johnson said the prorogation was necessary to start a new parliamentary session and give time for the political parties' annual conferences. But Scotland's highest court declared last week that the real reason was stymie Parliament by cutting back on the time available to debate Brexit options. Asked if he had lied to the Queen, Johnson answered, "Absolutely not. And indeed, as I say, the High Court in England plainly agrees with us." He said, referring to an earlier judgment in a separate case made by judges in London, "The only problem was that the English court didn't agree with him. It merely said it didn't have the power to rule in the case, which is why it too has been referred up to the Supreme Court." 11 justices will hear both cases this week. Their judgment will be binding. Historians are yet to find an example of any prime minister being found guilty of misleading a monarch. The government must obey the law, said Vernon Bognander, research professor at King's College London and the author of Beyond Brexit Towards a British Constitution. If the law is that Parliament cannot be prorogued, then it must be recalled and the advice to the Queen rescinded. If the PM breaks the law, then he will be prosecuted and brought before the courts just like any other citizen. Bogdaner explained, meanwhile, the Queen retains her political independence by sticking rigidly to the long-established convention of only ever acting on the advice of the Prime Minister. So when she was asked to approve the suspension of Parliament, she did so without questioning it. But if she wasn't give a full explanation for the suspension, then the court could rule she was misled. She probably wouldn't divulge her personal feelings, but such a ruling world hardly set a positive tone for Johnson's weekly audience with the Queen, a tradition his procedures valued highly. The Queen is a font of knowledge, having counselled every PM since Winston Churchill. For the Queen, the worst-case scenario would be to be placed in a situation where she would need to make a political decision. But what if the Supreme Court rules against Johnson's government and orders him to recall Parliament, but he refuses to do so immediately? There would be public uproar and all eyes would turn to the palace. Does the Queen sit and wait for Johnson or go against convention and act on court's judgment? Her option would be the subject of intense public debate, which would go to the core of why and how the monarchy even exists. It would also set a precedent for her successors. At the back of her mind would be her core duty to leave the crown in a stronger position than when it was passed to her. The public response to this potential constitutional crisis would also weigh heavily on her. The Queen has been tested before in her long reign and she came out stronger, but she is surely hoping not to be tested again by this week's case. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faced a battle for political survival in a closely fought election on Tuesday that could end his 10-year domination of national politics. Opinion polls put former Armed Forces Chief Benny Gantz's centrist blue and white party neck and neck with Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party and suggest the far-right Yisrael Beiteinu party could emerge as kingmaker in coalition talks. The election is very close. I call on all citizens of Israel to come vote, Netanyahu said, his voice hoarse after weeks of campaigning. As he cast his vote in Jerusalem, Gantz voted shortly afterwards in Rosh Hayin near Tel Aviv and wished everyone luck. Prohibited by law from campaigning on mainstream media, both men took to social networks. Netanyahu live-streamed a question and answer session on Twitter, pledging for his base to mobilize. Gantz posted a video of himself leaning out a car window in traffic during a random encounter with a supportive commuter. The two main parties campaign in Israel's second parliamentary election in 5 months pointed to only narrow differences on many important issues. The regional struggle against Iran, ties with the Palestinians and the United States, and the economy. An end to the Netanyahu era would be unlikely to lead to a big change in policy on hotly disputed issues in the peace process with the Palestinians that collapsed 5 years ago. Netanyahu has announced his intention to annex the Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank, where the Palestinians seek statehood, but Blue and White has also said it would strengthen the Jewish settlement blocks in the West Bank, with the Jordan Valley as Israel's eastern security border. The Palestinians and the many countries consider the settlements to be illegal. That's all from now. Thank you for joining today's news and hope we will see you later.